The horror of that Good Friday 2,000 years ago. How did it ever get to this, we might ask? I suspect it rare for the Magi to get a look in on Good Friday, but I have found myself thinking what they would have made of this. Some 30 years before, they had seen his star, they had trekked across the desert, and when they saw the young Jesus, they recognized him to be a king, especially surprising because these were not Jewish travelers, and their gifts fit for a king: gold and frankincense and myrrh. But their ultimate gift, they gave their gift of worship. And yet now, barely in his 30s, rejected, scorned, executed. How did it ever get to this? The Magi may have thought. I put some headings on the order of service. My first heading, the darkest cry on the darkest day. Verse 45, from noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? The most harrowing of words recorded for us in the original Aramaic, and so the exact syllables that Jesus cried out. The worst scream I have ever heard. I was visiting somebody in hospital, and from the next bay, I heard the beep, beep, beep of the monitor, which then turned to the continuous bleep as the person died, followed by the howl of agony, and I can still hear it, the howl of agony from the person who realized that their dad had gone. The visceral pain of separation. The cross of Jesus, how did it ever come to this? The betrayal, the injustice, the lies, the corruption, the brutality, the nails. No, the real question is not how did it ever come to these physical things, horrific as they are. The real question is, how did it ever come to the Father separating himself from the Son? How did it ever come to this? The darkest cry on the darkest day. The darkest day, is that a clue? The earth goes dark. A solar eclipse, perhaps? No, a solar eclipse lasts 6 or 7 minutes. This was 3 hours. An eclipse cannot happen at full moon. Passover is always at full moon. But there is no natural explanation for this darkness. We conclude that it is just like the birth of Jesus, a supernatural one-off, just like the resurrection of Jesus, a supernatural one-off. Except that it had happened once before, just prior to a Passover. There's a coincidence, centuries earlier, prior to the first Passover. Pharaoh of Egypt enslaving God's people in Egypt. God acts in judgment. Those 10 terrible plagues, one of which was the plague of darkness. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Let there be light, he said, but in Egypt, God withdraws his light. In judgment against a Pharaoh and his people who act against his good and radiant ways. The people who prefer darkness are given darkness. And at the cross, Jesus takes on the sin of all his followers. The sin of all those who will ever cry to him for mercy. The sin of his predecessor, the adulterous, murderous King David. The sin of this gospel writer, Matthew, a thieving, treacherous tax collector for the Romans. The sin of his successor, the murderous Apostle Paul. 2,000 years later, the sin of me. And if you have cried to him, the sin of you. The darkest cry on the darkest day. Jesus experiences the judgment of God, the wretched abandonment by God the Father in the place of King David, the Apostle Paul, the Gospel writer Matthew, you, person who loves Jesus, and me. The darkest cry on the darkest day. Verses 47-48, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. Jewish folklore said that if you cried to Elijah, he would come and help you. The crowd seemed to think that that's what Jesus was doing. They gave him wine, perhaps to help dull the pain. An act of kindness? No, more likely that they wanted him to live for longer so he could experience the agony for longer, so that they could mock him for longer. But then the final cry of Jesus and heaven's seismic response. Verse 50, and when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. John, in his gospel, gives us his exact words. It is finished. Yes, gloriously, it is. His work is finished. His sacrifice is finished. His paying the price is finished. His abandonment by God the Father is finished. His mission to pay the price for the sins of his people, it is finished. The final cry of Jesus, and now what I'm calling heaven's seismic response, or more accurately, heaven's three seismic responses. Just listen out for them, will you? 51, at that moment the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They went out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. Heaven's seismic reaction. The tearing of the temple, the shaking of the earth, the raising to life of many people. Why did these things happen? Because they are showing what the cross was really about. Why did it come to this? The Magi may have asked, this is why it came to this. Matthew would have responded. The tearing of the curtain. The thing that we often forget is that the temple was not a church or even a cathedral. Our building here, we love our building here. We find it good to have a place of our own that we can meet in. But it's not a temple. It's not a place where God lives. God is no more present in this building than he is in any other building. Whereas the Old Testament temple was symbolically where God lived. To meet with God, you went to the temple. Except you didn't. Because God's bit, God's special place, called the most holy place, no one was pure enough to go in that bit. Only one man, the high priest, he could go in, but only once a year, and only after extensive sacrifices for sin. The most holy place, it was closed off by this most enormous curtain. I don't think I'm being especially controversial by saying that it is a feature of our Western culture at the moment that makes us think that we are entitled. If I want something, well, why shouldn't I have it? If someone else has got something that I don't have, well, that's not fair. And so our relationship with God. Can I speak to God? Well, of course I can. Isn't it his job to be there listening out for me? I'm entitled to speak to God. I'm entitled to have him at my beck and call. But why would I think that? I mean, am I similarly entitled to speak to anyone else? I phone you up, someone else in your household answers the phone. I say, can I speak to you? And the answer comes back, well, actually, they're just a bit busy at the moment. And I say, no, I want them on the phone now. I'm entitled to speak to them. Really, they would say. How much more bizarre if I were to phone Windsor Castle with the same approach? How infinitely more bizarre for me to assume that I'm entitled to approach God. That is what God was teaching his people through the temple years. His people were not entitled to come anywhere near him because of their underlying sin, their bad attitude towards him. They had lost that right back in Eden. And for so long as we think we are entitled, the message of the cross will remain hidden to us. But when we connect the abandonment of Jesus instead of me on the cross, caused by my sin being removed from me and heaped on him, followed by the last cry of Jesus with the simultaneous tearing down of the temple curtain, Jesus removes my sin, and instantly the barrier between me and God is lifted. Extraordinary, we rightly say. Extraordinarily wonderful. Because of the cross, I do now have access. I do have constant and ongoing access, not to some mere earthly king, but to the King of Kings himself. All because of the cross. One has to ask, if the curtain is gone, what was the point of the temple anymore? There was no point to the temple anymore. And within 40 years, it was to be destroyed and never rebuilt. So where does God live now? Where is his temple now? Subject of another sermon, but we are his temples now. So cleansed are we, not by the blood of animal sacrifices, but by the blood of his Son, that his Spirit is able to come and live within us, his temples. The final cry and heaven's seismic response. Firstly, the tearing of the curtain. Secondly, the shaking of the earth. The earth shook just as it did in the time of Moses. Remember, he went up the mountain. God spoke to him. He gave him his 10 commandments. These are my good laws, he said. The way that you will enjoy life, the way that you will be kept safe. And the earth shook. The law came through Moses, but as we well know, we are incapable of keeping the law. We need Jesus to keep forgiving us. We need the Holy Spirit to keep changing us from within as he makes us his temple. It is finished, cries Jesus, and the earth shakes. It is as good as done, heaven declares. The law came through Moses, but we need more. We need grace and we need mercy. Yes, we now have that through the cross. Heaven's seismic response, the tearing of the curtain, the shaking of the earth, and thirdly, the raising to life of many people. Verse 52, the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. I don't think these are especially well-known verses. Let me read them again. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. I wonder what your questions are. I'm going to do something brave. I'm going to guess what some of your questions are, and then I'm going to give you my answer to your questions that I'm guessing. Who were these people? My answer, I have no idea. How long did they stay alive for? I have no idea. What did they say to the people they appeared to? I've no idea. Didn't this freak people out? I've no idea. So why did this happen? I do have some idea. Why did this happen? Because God was declaring to us, God was demonstrating to us that because of the cross, that coming back to life again with a body after we have died is now not just for Jesus. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. Many people who had been made holy by his death were coming alive with bodies. This is a preview of the resurrection at the second coming. Here's a question I genuinely had for years. Yes, I may be as certain as I can be that God raised Jesus from the dead in a body, but how do I know that he will raise me from the dead in a body? Because this event here of many people who have been made holy, coming to life again, is a taster of what is to come for followers of Jesus. Because of what Jesus achieved on the cross, Christian, you will have life after death. Christian, you will have a new physical body in that life. My opening question, how did it come to this? Our answer, thank God it did come to this. And so my final heading, from Magi to Centurion, seeing with new eyes. Matthew starts his gospel with non-Jewish visitors from far off, the Magi seeing something of the glory of Jesus. Matthew ends his gospel with non-Jewish visitors from far off, the Roman soldiers, seeing something of the glory of Jesus. And those soldiers in those few short hours, how they came to see the cross of Jesus with new eyes. Verse 54, when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God. A few hours earlier, they saw Jesus as someone to be mocked, to be flogged, to be discarded. How their eyes were opened. Terror, fear, holy fear, the Son of God. So striking, they saw what not even the Magi saw. The Magi saw a king, maybe even God's king, but the centurion saw God himself. The centurion and those soldiers, they saw God the Son being torn apart from God the Father. They saw Jesus, the light of the world, being cast into utter darkness. They saw the king not saving himself, but saving others. So that those who believe in him may have complete forgiveness, may have unfettered access to the Father, may have the Spirit not living in a building, but living in them, may have life after death, may have bodily life after death. The centurion and the soldiers see with fresh eyes. Lord, I want to see with fresh eyes the glory of why it had to come to this.